Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with today doing a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is you want me to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today we're going to be looking at one from Isaiah. It says Ezra by Oneohtrix Point Never. Interesting title. This one comes from Oneohtrix Point Never's Bandcamp. Always excited about using Bandcamp rather than YouTube when I can. Let's dive right into this and see what's going on. I legit thought that it was a broken file. Maybe my internet was going out. Really neat counterpoint going on right here. Really neat bass work, but I'm really not seeing its placement in the larger picture. Really neat pocket idea that's going on right there. Because, of course, it's just going to end abruptly. What was I thinking, expecting anything else? It even ended in the middle of a phrase. If I found the phrase correctly, I mean, it's just. We could have been introduced in the middle of the phrase, which means my perception of the beginning is actually not the beginning. Okay, Isaiah, I really, really hope you suggested this just to throw me off and not because you wanted some help understanding what's going on here, because I don't think I'm going to be able to help much with the latter there. Um, wow. Okay. Let's start with the general abrasiveness of it. And I say that because it's abrasive to me. I don't get what's going on. A lot of ideas here I feel are done specifically to disrupt. And because of that, it makes the song feel very antagonistic. But that is just my experience with it. So I'm probably going to continue to use this idea of the song being abrasive. I'm probably going to continue to use that word and synonyms to it, but I want everyone to know from this point on that when I say things like that, I'm speaking about my relationship to the song and not necessarily everyone's. I'm sure there are people who listen to this and find it soothing or calming or meditative. That is not my experience. So, this antagonistic track here. Every component seems to be disruptive in a way that doesn't just obstruct the song's ability to naturally form growth and movement, but also to obstruct the listener's ability to fully comprehend every aspect that is being presented. There are multiple times when we have elements that come in not just to disrupt the rhythmic flow or the melodic flow, but also to cover up other ideas. It makes it difficult to really get a grip on any one thing that's going on, because that one thing could be overshadowed or completely forgotten at any moment in time. It appears to me to be a collection of sounds, samples, and ideas placed together haphazardly. And once again, I say that a bit metaphorically. Of course, I'm going to assume that Oneohtrix point never. Oneohtrix point never. Man, that's just a tough name for me to say. That they have a very particular vision in mind, and everything in this song came together through particular intricate placement, right? I'm not going to say that much was left up to chance here. However, the illusion I'm getting from the song is a haphazard placement. Like I said, a haphazard placement of varying ideas that seem to have very little to do with each other. That is the entire song to me. There's some really neat things that come out of this. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but my relationship with the track is one of confusion because nothing seems to fit. I have been given a box of puzzle pieces, and sometimes the shapes, the cutout of the pieces, do connect, but the picture that results from the connection is chaotic. And it almost seems to a point, and I should also say half the box doesn't connect to anything else at all. Um, so I'm getting half of a picture here, and the picture that I am getting is not even congruent within itself. That's a very good visual metaphor for my auditory exploration in this. And that's what I mean when I say it's abrasive, that it's antagonistic. It's asking me, or maybe I'm asking myself, because I'm approaching this how I would typically listen to most music. I'm being asked, whether by the music or myself, to figure out what's going on here when the song itself is purposefully, by design, not something that works together like a puzzle. The way that I typically listen to music is to listen to each of the individual parts and ask questions. Are there any similarities between the drums and the guitar? Are there any differences between the vocals and the bass? Do those differences mean anything? Can I pick up on any sort of compositional ideas based on the way that things are working together? I ask questions of the art and I answer them myself, and that's how I come to the conclusions that I do in the analysis section. And this song has been crafted in such a way that my analytical process of unlocking a song like a puzzle is rendered null and void here because this puzzle was not meant to be solved, at least not in the way that I solve puzzles. It could be an entirely different puzzle altogether, in which case my approach is the wrong one, or it could be a puzzle beyond my perception. Just to make an odd sci-fi quote, this could be a fourth dimensional puzzle that I lack the reality to understand. Maybe there is some way that I can understand what's going on here and speak about it, but I lack the perspective to do so, tying back to how I approach music, what I typically listen for. This song creates properties and patterns in ways far divorced from what I'm typically looking for. It could just be that I'm speaking the wrong language to understand this track. And that is my experience with it. Now, let's move from the subjective to the objective and, well, let's just talk about what it is doing and not necessarily what it's trying to say with those. Let's just look at some raw ideas here. There is a heavy use of abrupt stopping of a sound. Um, it seems that we have what I feel would be a legato whole note, maybe. It hits the note, it allows it to expand and begin to taper off, but before it can fully fade itself out, for the decay to naturally happen on the tone, there's an abrupt cut and it just stops the sound. And it was the very first sound we heard right before breathing, or right after. I think the very first thing we did here was like a breath being taken, but it was real quick, blink and you miss it, and then we immediately hear this one beat and then just nothing. I legit thought something was up with my system. Maybe the internet went out. Maybe the file was corrupted. Maybe this was a bad upload. Like, I don't know. But my first thought was not, this is what the song's supposed to sound like. Again, not approaching it or speaking the correct language for us, or approaching it on the same platform. Um, and this is an idea that's presented throughout this entire track, especially in this core sound that's present in many of the sections, is this underlying beat with an abrupt stop to it. I think it's a perfect analogy for a lot of how this song works structurally. There are several sections of this track that we just were in a section and we didn't have a chordal resolution. We didn't really see the end of a phrase. Sometimes we were in the middle of a phrase. There just wasn't an indication that we were done with this section before we moved to another. And of course, the transition here is abrupt. First, we were doing this, and a bar later, we are doing that. This is something we've seen in a lot of music. I feel like I bring up harsh transitions 50% of the time, probably. But this is a different style of harsh transition, not just because of the abruptness, which is very similar, but because the first idea we're in, does not feel like it has reached a resolution where we could move on. So not only do we have the abruptness of the style change bar to bar, but we have the abruptness in that we didn't even realize we were ready for a change when it happens. It is doubly abrupt. We also have a key vocal track that just cannot stay consistent. It is rhythmically in flux. It is metrically in flux. It is melodically in flux. The pitch is constantly changing. I don't feel like that word, which I'm pretty sure is Ezra half of the time. There was another word, phrase maybe, being stated that, or maybe just a sound. I don't even, it might not even have been a word. Maybe that's why I didn't understand it. Maybe it was just vocal sounds. And we usually get a pitch, and then the pitch rises and rises and falls and rises and falls. And it's just sporadic. Once again, there seems to be no rhyme or reason. Again, I'm just not speaking the language is a possibility, but it could also be purposefully difficult to understand, right? But the rhythm, well, I guess the rhythm is typically the same, but when it starts, the rhythm changes. Sometimes it's on a downbeat, sometimes it's on an offbeat, sometimes it starts a phrase, and sometimes it's an accent within a phrase. And like I said, the pitch is constantly changing. Like, this idea is just in flux. Going back to this idea of a fourth dimensional song, it seems to be constantly changing its position across four dimensions, and I just can't get a read on it. It's constantly morphing into other styles, other sounds, other ways of presenting the information. And interestingly, there are some nice ideas that get presented. 2 minutes in, give or take, there is a bass line that comes in and lays down a fairly standard bass line. It's not just a series of pedal tones. It has a melody to it. It's a nice, rich bass tone. Nothing too impactful, but certainly something that has some nice width to it and a really nice EQ on it. Plays a beautiful melody for a few times until it just doesn't. It also stands out quite starkly against all of the digital manipulation going on and the digital sounds. This, at least to me, feels acoustic. It doesn't have to be. It could also be a digital bass, but it's designed to emulate the sound of an acoustic bass rather than to sound electronic, like a lot of the other sounds do. Even the one acoustic tone we have, which is the human voice, is constantly modulated in a way that makes it sound inhuman. It's just very digital and electronic. And there was one time even when we had a synth melody that was not being modified too heavily. We had a tone and an idea, and it just kind of looped, and we paired that with the bass idea. I don't think it was the same bass idea, but the same bass tone with its own melody, and it was actually creating some nice counterpoint against that rhythmic, short-stopping tone that was existing from the very beginning of the song, creating this rhythmic element underneath it. It was one of the few moments, I even called it out. I said, nice counterpoint there. It was one of the few moments I felt the song was more traditionally focused on, traditional structure and roles of what a song, roles of a song, melody and rhythm and harmony and atmosphere. And of course, it was fleeting. By the time I recognized what was going on there, it was gone. We also had moments of Hocket, though I think that these might have been unintentional, though again, it could have just been very expertly placed to seem haphazard, but might have been very intricately placed to be a hot kit. But we had two ideas that had pretty much nothing to do with each other, and every once in a while they just kind of they were sparse ideas, right? You'd get a note or a couple of notes and then a silence and then another note, a couple notes, silence, kind of that idea. But within each of the rests, when this instrument was resting, this instrument would be playing. When this one was resting, this one would be playing. So you get this idea that sort of bounces between the two voices as well as the two headphones because they're both hard pans. This is the definition of a hocket, a single melody line divided up between multiple instruments. It works so well right there, and I might have pointed that one out while we were listening to it as well. But there are moments of traditional songwriting and more typical composition tools being utilized in here, but again, they're blink and you miss it ideas. They're there and then they're gone. The whole song seems to have this inconsequential etherealness to it. Every idea is so short-lived, so much so that even our basic beats underneath the song can't exist for an entire beat itself. We have this underlying tone that sort of creates the rhythmic structure, but it can't even naturally decay its own sound. It gets abruptly cut off. Nothing here can exist to its natural length. Everything must be stopped prematurely. And through that, we get this structure where the song feels... I'm going to go back to this fourth dimensional idea here. The song feels like it is constantly caving in on itself. We have one idea, and then it just gets cut short because this other idea gets slapped on top of it. Not like this. They're not touching ends. It covers up and eliminates what would have been the finality of that phrase and begins a new one. Occasionally, two ideas will just exist together at a moment, even though they have nothing complementary about each other. And it's like this other one phased in for a brief moment while this sort of warped into its own area that just wasn't in focus. If you've ever seen a visualization of a fourth dimensional shape, why am I thinking of the word tesseract? Is that a fourth dimensional idea? I don't think so. Maybe it is. But they have this strange amorphous element to them where they sometimes seem to alter the shape entirely. Where there once was corners, there are not anymore, and other corners begin to protrude out of straight lines, and it's because we're kind of viewing them as three-dimensional objects at best, despite them being fourth dimension. There's an extra dimensionality to it that we simply cannot perceive, and because of that, what should seem more of a natural movement feels alien. And that's the perfect analogy for this. These ideas should go into something that feels a bit more congruent, that feels more natural to move between them, but instead we are hearing this messed up, again, I say that in the nicest way, mess of a track, again, I say that in the nicest way, where elements just seem to phase in out of nowhere, even where they don't belong. And it's because I'm perceiving it the wrong way, but I simply do not have the perspective to gain to see it on the way it's designed to be seen. I cannot envision or look upon a fourth dimension object because I simply do not understand what the fourth dimension is. I have no way of really gaining that knowledge. I am a three-dimensional being, not a fourth one. And I suppose that that's where the metaphor begins to break down here, because I can come around to understanding and speaking the language of this track. I can talk to the composer, the producer. I'm sure they're one and the same. I can get more involved into this scene of music. I can approach it from angles I don't typically approach music. I can find ways to look at this artistically. I can come around to appreciating this and understanding what it's doing, but where I'm at right now, it feels impossible. And that's the whole song to me. There are moments of beauty in here, but most of it just sounds chaotic. It's uh, contrast for contrast's sake in a lot of situations. And those moments of beauty tell me that possibly if I just changed my perspective, if I just understood the language of the song, I would be able to find the beauty in there. But as it is, there are moments where the image has morphed into something I can understand before changing and continuing its morphing into something I don't. I'm kind of finding beauty in the transitory ideas because that's the moment when it looks most like a three-dimensional object. I really hope this metaphor is working because I am stretching it out. Um, I guess let's look at the lyrics here. Maybe I'll get something out of this. So we have Ezra, there's 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 Ezra. Hey! And we go from that mantra to alternatingly repeating the words in and out until we just say in like 12 times in a row, and we switch it back to in and out, and then we switch that out to give you, to give you, to give you, to give you, to give you. And we go back to there's Ezra, and then to give you, and then there's Ezra, and then me and you. And then the first time we have a complete idea right here. It says, I didn't say all the things I wanted to say. You can't take back what you keep taking away. Ezra, there's Ezra, there's Ezra. Like, I really, in the final moment, when we are repeating this idea of Ezra, there's Ezra, there's a backing idea. Well, it's in parentheses. I'm going to assume it's a second vocal or maybe a background vocal. It changes a few times. It says in, out, to give you, repeats those ideas. But on the second to the very last idea, it says anything to stay near me. And the lyrics are making me think of garbled up transmission where we've only got a portion of the idea and it's on loop because, well, the message was, 4 minutes long and we really only got 5 seconds worth of it. So we're going to loop that for the first minute. And then we got a new idea at minute 2. It was supposed to be another minute and a half or so, but we only picked up 8 seconds worth of that. So we're going to loop that for the entire portion that this is supposed to be because we do have a marker at minute 3.5 of another idea, but we also only got a portion of that. So we're going to loop that for a while. And it really does feel like a broken up message. But beyond that, I have no idea what any of it means. It's more of a feeling as far as I'm concerned. I don't know that there's any specific idea that's supposed to be presented here. This is an emotion in words, and those words are turned into an aspect of a song that is, to me, more about emotion than anything else. It breaks most of the rules of good music writing in order to create something that I don't know would be possible if you tried to work within more conventional composition techniques. And it's unique. I can say that. I still don't have the vocabulary, I think, to fully appreciate it. But I think the vibe is there. There's a lot of confusion in the music, or maybe that's just me. I felt very confused listening to this, and that confusion seems to be present in the lyrics as well. There are things that need to be said. In fact, the only line that is very concretely stated is I didn't say all the things I wanted to say, but the things that are said are cyclical. It seems to be that this person only finds it easy to say simple things, and that the things that they want to say are difficult to present, possibly difficult to talk about, and the music conveys that well. It has moments of fleeting beauty, of moments that make sense, maybe of confidence, but majority of this is lost in translation. There's other things the song wants to say, and you can kind of get a vibe for them, but it never quite gets around to saying them. Anyways, those are my thoughts on on Oneohtrix Point Never's Ezra. This is where you guys come in. Isaiah, I really hope that you appreciate some aspect of this. I always feel bad when people submit for special selection and then I don't really have much to deliver on it other than possibly a half hour of confusion, and I don't know, maybe there's some entertainment value in that. Everyone else, hit me up in the Ezra, you can hit me up not Ezra. Oh my jeez, my brain's so broken right now. Isaiah, you can hit me up in the comments too. In fact, I am curious what your perspective is on this, and even more particularly, why it was requested. Is it just the entertainment value of tossing me something way outside my comfort zone? Do you have a specific reading of this or anything like that? I'm interested in that. And of course, like I said, everyone else, hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this, anything you'd like to add to it, any context you would want to give me, because I could use some context. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here, has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, join the Discord, join me on Twitter, a bunch of other stuff, but check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'd greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps this one up. Be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to check out our penultimate Wild Screamers and another special selection, our last special selection for the week, actually. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.